So something that I'm a big believer in is living life on your own terms. And in order to do that in today's society, you kind of need to have enough monetary... You need money to be able to make your own choices a lot of the time. If you want to wake up and decide how your day goes every day, well, then you can't be worrying about bills, because in order to pay the bills, you normally need a job. So personal finance and trying to retire earlier, some people like to call it, although I don't like the word retirement, but have the financial independence, something that I really want to strive for. And I think there's a few people out there as well that are switched on when they're young and try and get to that stage early, right? The earlier you get there, then the younger you get there, then the more time you have to really reap the benefits of that financial independence, and the longer you can go by being in that position. But something that I did come across is the idea of, some people call it, retire. So the FIRE community is something that's also been, there's something in the last decade or last 5 years that I've kind of seen around, and I get the idea of it, although I don't know how I don't know if it's a good thing if it goes mainstream. But the FIRE community, financial independence, retire early. It uses the word retirement. And that kind of got me scratching my head, because it's not what I strive for. It's more the independence, right? Because I want to be able to do businesses and things like that where I control my time. It's not so much retire, because retirement has this idea, the average person has this idea of sitting on a beach drinking pina coladas all day. But if you know anything about the 4-hour work week, and I very much recommend reading that book, or at least watching a recap summary of it. That's what I like to do if I can't be bothered reading a whole book, is watch summaries about them. It will explain how it isn't actually what you want to do. You don't want to be sitting and drinking pina coladas on a beach, because it's only fun for so long. But it did get me thinking on the idea of retirement, and how much do you actually need to retire? Because they use this word as a crossover between financial independence and retirement. How much do you actually need? So I did some research, and I want to show you what I found in case anyone else was wondering the same things. So there's many different sources that have their own little twists and take on exactly how much that dollar value should be. But generally they all kind of try and stick between the 70 and 80% of what you currently get salary-wise. And that's an interesting way to look at it, because it bases itself off the premise of, if people have a bigger salary, they tend to spend more. And I don't completely disagree. I don't actually disagree with that as a whole. Now, sure, some people are much better at saving than others, and it's a bad habit for your expenses to go up as your income rises, because then at the end of the day, you're spending more money on materialistic things, in theory, and all this increase in hard work that you've been working up in the company or building your salary over the years, well, then you're just blowing it all on things anyway. But generally speaking, people that earn more will expend more. They'll spend more money. So I think there's actually a pretty good theory to go off. And like I said, the number's normally between 67% I've seen based on Australia and things like that, and up to 80, right? Depending if you want a lavish retirement or something a little bit more frugal. But between 60 and 70, let's pick a number of 75%, something that's nice and easy to work with, because that's pretty easy to do the math as well. And you can always do this yourself, along with this video, how I'll explain it, to crunch your numbers as well. Should be pretty easy. So let's say you make $100,000. Well, that means every year in retirement, you should have about $75,000 to spend over the year. Okay, because it's not like you stop eating. It's not like the expenses stop. You're not out and about as much. You're not out buying sports cars and things like that. So things don't really change too much. It's just that I think you've spent all the money you need to over your life. It'll be more on your housing or your retirement village or food, drinks, if you want a bit of wine on the side, things like that. You probably want to travel a little bit. So nothing too crazy to add into the equation here. But let's go 50,000, because I feel like that's more like what the average person will be earning, $50,000 per year as a salary. Now this works both Australian and in United States dollars. You could do the calculation a little bit differently, and if you're in a different country that uses different currency, but I believe the rules would still apply the same. So if you earn $50,000 per annum, $37,500 will be what theoretically you would need to survive on in your retirement phase. And that's great, but we can actually go one step further. Now that we know that number, you have a general idea of what you'll spend in theory, then you can actually find out what that big number in your super should be. Because in Australia, you work and 9% of your pay goes in from your employer into a superannuation fund. And this is so that the government doesn't have to pay a pension once you retire. The theory is, I think they'll completely phase it out. Maybe not completely, but the theory is that throughout your working career, you're building up this massive fund that that money is invested throughout whatever company you choose to put it in, and it will grow and grow into what you retire on when you finally pull the pin on your work. And this is one thing, if we just divert slowly, we'll just quickly hear from the topic of the video, but so many people are scared about stocks. And I'm the biggest believer in stocks because people are like, oh, can't you lose everything though? I'm like, could lose everything in the bank, right? If Australia's sunk, there's so many things, but at the end of the day, what do you think your superannuation is? Like, it's being invested in stocks. You can choose to do it more safely. You can choose to do it more growth wise, and people do that, but then they don't see it in the same light as stocks. They don't see superannuation as investing. They're so scared of investing in stocks, but they're not scared about their super. So I kind of use that as my little disregard to people's fears of the stock market. Now, you can lose everything in stocks if you don't know what you're doing, so don't just jump into it. But if you've always been someone that's on the fence about stocks, and even if you're, getting towards the retirement age, you've probably clicked on this video because you're interested in that. Great. They're great. It's so much better than sitting money in the bank, because what do you think the bank does? Uses that money and invests it in stocks themselves, invests it themselves. So just skip the middleman, and you can do some very safe investments in your own time, and you get much better return than sitting in a bank account. But let's get back to the video topic. So the average retirement age in Australia right now is 66 years old, and it is also that in the United States. Most countries seem to line up with about the same age. I mean, humans are about the same from wherever they come from, with culture being a little bit different, but bodies are bodies, right? We need to retire. They get towards their working extent, and 66 or 67 seems to be about where the age is. Now, the estimations is, well, it's actually scheduled almost, that in a couple years gaps, that the retirement age actually increase. And this is because of our technology is bettering, health knowledge is getting better. So that's good news. You get to work longer. But let's go 66 years old. Now, the average death age, okay, I've researched this. Now this is where we get to the gloomy part of the video, is about 83 years old. Now, I've seen a list of countries, and I'll actually explain some of them to you. Where is it? List of countries by life expectancy. So here you're about to get some knowledge you probably didn't want. Number one, I'll let you quickly guess to yourself. I wouldn't have guessed this one. Number one's actually Hong Kong, followed by Japan, Singapore, Italy, Spain, Switzerland. Number 7 is Australia. United States, United Kingdom's 29, United States 38, behind Lebanon. Okay, so there you go. But either way, all the guys are probably sitting here having a bit of a chuckle because they're in the top 10 countries or whatever there is. But we can't laugh, boys, because in every single country that I've quickly scanned over here, females smash us. They live much longer than guys on average. So we're getting stooged in that regard. But Hong Kong being the highest, the average is 84.7 years. Australia comes in at 83.3. So let's just grab 83 or 82. We'll grab 83. But in between the United States and Australia, mostly, who I would estimate would come across this video. So if we do 83, and then we take away the retirement age of 66, we are left with 17 years being in retirement. Now, the calculations we've done before, the average person earns about $50,000 per year, which means 75% of that, you need $37,500 per year. We just multiply that with the 17. 17 times 37.5. and that spits out the number of 637.5, and that would be in $1,000 number there. So multiply. So $637,500. So let's just round up, $638,000. So you see some people estimate they need $1.7 million, $2 million to retire. I think that's a lot of fear being involved and overestimating, which isn't a bad thing, but you want to you want to overshoot the target, don't you? But you don't want to stress out so much that you're kind of hindering your lifestyle now, trying to save so much for it. So about 600 to 700,000, I think, would put you in the clear if you live the average, which is 17 years in retirement, and that's up to the age of 83. Now, some people go a lot further than that. So let's say that, and this is also without any revenue income or any income as you're retired. So some people might have a little business that they've developed, and someone takes over, like their family, or they hire a manager and they get a small cut of that every week. So that could blow the numbers much lower if you're getting income per week, or if you had rental properties, or if you had your own stocks and you're getting dividend payouts. That's always a nice touch as well. But let's just say you retired at 70 and lived to 100. So up the numbers a bit. Retired at 70, where you stopped getting income because your little business that you're running at home on the side, once you retired from your salary job, then you've also stopped at 70 4 years later after you retired from your salary job. 70 to 100 is the 30 years. So we go 30 by the 37.5. Well, then we're looking at $1.125 million, $1,125,000. And that's living on $37,500 per year. Now, what if we wanted to be a bit more lavish? You like your 4-bedroom house and you still want to drive a BMW until your late 90s. Let's say the 30 years instead, we're on the 75,000, as if to say your salary used to be $100,000 per year, and 75% of that brings it down to 75,000. Times that by 30 years. That's where the $2,250,000 mark comes in. But you'd have to be doing, unless you're living in a very nice retirement village, with all expenses paid, and you go on bus trips. I don't really know how they work, but to spend $2,250,000, that means you have to be in retirement for 30 years and be spending $75,000 per year. Which, I mean, I'm not retired, I'm far from it, but in my mind, it's hard to spend $75,000. I think that's, somewhat hard to do even when you're like my age and want sports cars, or 50 with children. That's actually 75,000 with children. No, they're expensive. They are expensive. But if you have $2 million in your retirement fund, I think you're well and truly in the clear. From what I've done my research on today, in my findings, in my mind, I think you're pretty clear with $700,000. Now, if you're not there, don't stress. You can always do investments now, build it up, and your super will grow, because over the average, stocks and super funds and things like that climb between 7 to 10% per annum, and they compound on each other. So you might not be there yet, but all your investments will start really cranking up the longer you leave them in. So thanks for watching, guys. You can always hit the thumbs up button if you found anything interesting about this video. It was fun to go through this stuff, and I really like doing videos on finance. This channel has now been renamed to Money Matters for a few reasons. We talk about the matter of money, right? And also, it does matter, I think. A lot of people like to demonize money, but I think if you view it through a different lens, instead of seeing someone with a Lamborghini and being like, oh, look at that rich prick, I think it's a much better way to go about life, of being like, wow, I wonder how he got that. I'm going to go and ask him and learn from it, because you know what? I wouldn't mind a Lamborghini as well. That's how I like to see life. And you can always subscribe to see more finance video related stuff in the future. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you next time.